Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
One of the biggest challenges in life is when you have become a caregiver. Somebody is ill, going through challenges, whatever it might be. Now you're taking care of them. Now, add another layer on top of that, worrying about them or your spouse. Let's say the person you're caring for is not your spouse, but now you're worried about how they're feeling about it. You know, you're taking focus away from them and putting it on the person that you're giving care to. In general, caregiver worry is what we're focusing on today. And she helps people with this all the time as a coach for caregivers. Whoa. There's not many of them on this planet. So we appreciate her as our professional of the year. Marika Humphreys is back with us. Welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Steve, and good to be back with you.
Important things that we're talking about today because not a lot of people talk about this kind of stuff. And we've done some podcasts so far about caregiving, but the worrying situation, there's a lot going on there. Worrying about lab tests, if they're going to, progress in either direction, the person you're giving care to, or then now worrying about your spouse. What's their mindset? Because you're focused elsewhere. The whole worry thing. Where do we begin with that?
Yeah, I think let's just start with worry itself and the emotion that worry is essentially an emotion, right? It's both an action, I guess, and an emotion. We feel worry and then we worry about people. And I think it is something that is common for all of us. We can do this in a lot of areas of our life. I think it comes up a lot when we're caregiving and people worry about us as caregivers. There's a lot of worry going around happening. But in general, I would say feeling worried and worrying is it's just super unuseful because it kind of keeps us focused on things that are outside of our control, usually. Often it's another person or an event, like you mentioned, like how a situation, an illness, a health condition may progress. When we worry, it's because we're focused on what is something that's happening outside of us that we have no control over. And then we're worrying about often our response, our ability to handle it if it gets worse, or our ability to cope. And all of that just keeps us really kind of focused on a potential problem that maybe hasn't even come. But often that's the case, like we're focused on a possible problem or possible negative outcome or something that we have no idea if it's actually going to come to pass. So it's just kind of a useless waste of energy. And I say that with loving kindness because yet it's very natural to do and we all do it. But the first step is just really recognizing that, worry is not useful and it's not helpful and it feels terrible. And it's a lot of energy, kind of wastes a lot of energy when we spend time worrying.
So admittedly, I used to be a worrier and still do sometimes, but I stop it immediately. Things will come up. Just had something a little while ago. I'm like, stop. Because I've learned through experience, talking to people like you, research, that and they do research and studies and polls on this often, but it comes out to between 90 and 93%, usually every couple of years. That's about the number. 90 something percent of the things that we worry about never take place. You are literally wasting your energy on things that you don't need to. And all it's doing is taking away the focus of the now and putting it into the future. I don't know about you. I can't tell the future. I don't know that anybody can. If you know somebody, please let me know. I'd like to have them on our show. Nobody can do it. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 5 seconds from now. Seriously, 5 minutes from now, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years. So why even worry about it? Just like it, after a while, it gets laborious. Once you realize that you're worrying about stuff that when it gets here, deal with it. But deal with this right here, the now, not the past. Not that you're going to forget the past, but focusing on the future is where the worry, the anxiety all comes in, right?
Yeah, I think I worried more than I do now. And like you said, it still comes up. I think it's natural. So first of all, I think that's incredible that you have seen that in yourself, been able to grow in that way yourself just by recognizing. And also, I've heard the studies as well that yeah, most of the things we worry about don't come to pass. So therefore, it's just useless to do that. Um, and I think the other thing too is, wow, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But when we all are
Don't worry
focused
about
on
it. I'm kidding.
when we are focused on something that may or may not happen and likely won't happen, or at least won't happen in the way that we think it will, I think the other part of that study, there's been studies about worry, is that we often underestimate our ability to handle what a problem if it does come to pass. And so I think the other thing that we tend to do when we worry about something is we forget that we are actually probably very equipped to handle it, or that we will handle it. Like I
Mhm.
recently just got myself kind of worrying about, my week, and I have a busy week, and I have to stop myself and realize, okay, just one day at a time. When I look at my calendar, it often looks busier than it will be in the moment when I'm going through it. And I know that's just kind of, again, it's a form of worry and like thinking that I'm going to feel super busy, but my ability to handle that is not what I'm thinking about in that moment. So I think that's the other part, especially with caregiving, is you are probably more capable and resilient than you think you
Yep.
are in the moments when we're spending worried. And then that's also true of other people that you're worried about. Like that's
Mm.
the other side of this topic that I really want to talk about as well, is as a caregiver, we worry about others. We can worry, and often it's the person that we're caregiving for. And I think where I see that most is like worrying how they're taking care of themselves, thinking they're not taking care of themselves the way they should be, or worrying in my own personal story, I worried about my husband's anger. And he was just kind of, as his cancer progressed, he became a little more quick to anger. I wouldn't say a little more, a lot more quick to anger. And I worried about it. I worried about how anger was impacting his health and his ability to, fight off cancer. And so I think for caregivers, we worry often about the person we're caring for. And when we do that, we're also discounting their own strength, their own resilience, which may look different than ours does. In my own story again, like my husband was incredibly strong and resilient. It just looked different than mine did. And his anger at the time was just a way for him to express himself. But I think that's true if you can find the person that you're worried about, if you can see in them how they are strong. And sometimes I know that's really hard. It's like sometimes it looks like people are not doing well, or they are not, like, despite what they may appear, everybody has strength within them. And I think finding that for the person you're caring for can be an incredible gift, not just for you, but for them as well. Like
Sure.
when someone believes in us, when we're struggling to believe in ourselves, I think that's amazing. It feels amazing, and it's like a great gift. But also it reminds you that hey, they will manage, they will get through. And that's one way you can help to shift out of worry a little bit.
Do you feel that there's only so much worrying you can do about somebody? Now it's on them. It's their choice. You can't do any more.
Well,
That's
yeah, because again, we started with like identifying that worry is about things that are outside of us. And other people, by the nature, right? They have their own life, their own journey, their own choices. And sometimes they're going to make choices that we may or may not agree with. But guess what? That's their right? To live their life and make the choices that they want. And I think when you say that, we do get to a point where we recognize, okay, I can spend all day worrying, but it doesn't change anything because that person still gets to make their own choices. And they may make ones that I personally disagree with. But when we can see, I think that's another thing, that when you can see and trust or believe in a person's strength, or that they'll be okay, even though, that I think creates like an opening for support, and like in the relationship, that worrying can kind of break down. When we were talking, like when somebody worries about you, we've all experienced somebody worrying about us. And I know for me, when someone worries about me or tells me, oh, I worry about you, like this happened various times in my life, my first response is, like, don't. I'm fine. I will be fine, or I'll figure it out. Even because nobody wants that feeling, really. Most people don't, I should say. So, yeah, being worried over does not feel good. So if you can if you're the one doing the worrying, it doesn't feel good to that other person either.
And how many of us, even our parents, you become an adult, and your mother says, "Are you okay? Are you eating? Do you need any money?" And like, "I'm fine. It's okay." You don't want them to worry. They're just wired that way. But I guess the worrying about someone else is someone's way of showing love as well.
Yes, and I did remember my train of thought that I lost earlier by you saying that, because I think worry can become a habit. And yes, it does come from a place of love. We when we worry, it's about the people we care about, usually. And therefore, I think it is really important to recognize and stop yourself, especially if you have developed the habit of worrying and sharing that worry, because so much of what we do, we get in a habit of doing, and a lot of our behavior is habitual, but it doesn't always mean it's a good thing. Like, right,
Right.
some of our habits are not super effective. And so being able to recognize, like you did with yourself, and I think I've done in my life to a large extent around worry, is recognizing when you're heading down that path and knowing, okay, worrying over someone is not useful for me or for them. And how can I stop it? How can I interrupt it? I call it, like in coaching, we talk about interrupting patterns. And and then what can I think instead? So one of my strategies that I teach people is often just shifting where your mind goes. So instead of, oh my gosh, they're not, they need my help, or they need help, or they're not doing well, instead of thinking about that, which is going to cause you to feel worry, you can think about, well, this is also a person who, like I had one client whose her husband had cancer, but he was a marathon runner in his life. Like, he had done some pretty amazing, challenging things. And that was one of the processes we did together. As I said, think about all the ways that he has built up strength and resilience in his life. Even if it's been 10, 20 years ago, it doesn't matter. Like, he has that within them. And I think we all do, even young children. So if you can find that and remind yourself of how someone has shown strength in whatever way it looked, or done challenging things, that is a much better place to think about and focus on when you see them struggling. Because
Mm.
then you can genuinely feel like, you know what, I see you're struggling, and I know you are strong inside, and let me know how I can help. That
Yeah.
is a much different way of communicating than, I'm so worried about you, which is, like you said, mom, feels terrible. Do you need
Sure.
money? Do you need a little help? Yeah, most of us want to, get through it on our own and believe that we can.
So I'm going to flip this for just a sec. Do you think that sometimes the worry shows up as guilt?
You mean for the person that's worrying?
You're 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 I don't mean you, but somebody is worrying about somebody else. And maybe the worry in some instances is is a form of guilt, but it doesn't show up that way. What do I mean by that? Let's say you think to yourself, they're in this situation. Um, they need care. They're physically not the way they were. I should have ordered that test 3 years ago. I should have pushed them to take care of their health. Now it's guilt, but now you don't know how to deal with it. So now you just worry. I want to take care of you. I'm worried about you, but it's really something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you gave a great example. I think that happens a lot, actually. And that, again, I think that's a huge challenge in caregiving and just any close relationship, right? We often want to take responsibility for the other person's, or feel it's our responsibility to
Right.
take care for, like, manage their life. And I will say that very much came up for me in my own situation with my husband. I felt he had cancer, and when I saw him struggle emotionally, sometimes it was physically, but more I think it was emotionally, that when I saw him struggle emotionally, I felt like, as his wife and someone who I loved, I felt like it was my job to make him feel better. Like, that was my role.
Sure.
And what that resulted in was me endlessly trying to make him feel better, which ultimately was something I could not do because I couldn't control his feelings. Like, his feelings were not something that I managed, and he didn't want me to either. Later, I learned a very valuable lesson there. But so when we try to, I think you're absolutely right. The worry is often a form of, because we feel responsible in some way, and that's something we have to come to terms with. I mean, I'm a firm believer in really knowing that everybody has their own life journey, and we don't have control over others. We may have some influence there, but the influence will often happen when you connect with them and believe in them, not when you worry over them. But
Sure.
really, we ultimately don't have control. And, like, going back to, I should have ordered the test 3 years ago. That's a really classic scenario, because, but when that comes up for my clients, we talk about, and it might have changed nothing. Like,
Right.
again, we like to find these scenarios that, oh, if I had only done this, and if we'd only gone to the doctor earlier. But it doesn't mean they would have had a diagnosis. It doesn't mean it would have changed anything. We just kind of, our brain likes to create these sort of fantasies that we think would have maybe changed the outcome. So yeah, absolutely, guilt is yeah, a
I
kind of
think it's powerful. I think and I feel it's somewhat of a big driver in a lot of these instances where we worry. There's nothing wrong with it. Absolutely not. It's human, to feel that way, to care about that person, and you want them to be happy as best possible. You want them to be as comfortable as possible. Um, but it's their life too. And there's on, like you said, and you said it so well, even referring to your husband, that's how you can't change the way somebody thinks. You could do everything under the moon, the planet, the stars, the sun, everything to make them feel comfortable and make their life as best as it possibly could be. It might not matter. It might not matter because that's how they feel, and that's fine.
Yeah, and the other part of that too, trying to, like, in my situation, I tried to prevent him from getting upset in the first place. And so I kind of, for a while, I got in this phase where I, like, would just try to, he would get angry, and I would try to like smooth things out or anticipate what might upset him. And that made me this nervous, anxious wreck, which was not helpful at all, nor did it have any positive effect.
Sure.
And I think one of the things that when we're quick to like fix it for someone or want to soothe them or take responsibility for their feelings and make them feel better, what we skip doing in that very, honorable effort is that what we don't do is we don't validate how they're actually feeling in the moment. And what I mean by that is like, if they're struggling, sometimes they just need to be told that, hey, I see that you're struggling. Like, I hear you. And that's empathy, right? Just empathize. I mean, this is what a lot of times what therapists do. The first thing they do is they hear you. They validate what you're experiencing, and we can do that for our loved ones when we are quick to want to solve it for them, which again is that natural response with people we love. But when we do that, we miss out on an opportunity to just validate what they're going through. And sometimes that is like, we all want, to be heard in a sense, like we want to just have a chance to say, hey, this is hard. And I just need to like I just need to feel this for a minute. Don't try to fix it for me.
Sure. Yeah. Just to be heard, be seen. We all want to be fixers. And I'm in a men's group, joined about 10 weeks ago. Very impactful. It's leadership, community service. It's also learning about yourself, being there for others and all of that. And many times one of the men in the group, is about 8 of us, and it's a tribe of like maybe 50. In this group, it's 8. A man will come forward and say, yeah, I'm going through this, and he explains it. And right away, what do you want to do? I want to help you. I got this. I got this. And we all say the same thing. No advice. You're not to offer any advice. You're just there to hear, maybe ask questions and let them kind of figure it out. And a lot of times we get chastised, if you will. Somebody will say, no advice. Because right away, I want to help. I'm there for you. I want to help you. I hear you. I've dealt with that. But sometimes we have to realize that we need to figure it out. And we just needed to purge it, get it out of, and when I say we, I mean life in general.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, I think that's awesome that there's groups out there, especially for men, because I think women, we tend to, men, I think that's been harder. It's the message is to want to fix, or that's their job to fix. Sure. But what that does for the person who's talking, who is sharing their struggle, is it empowers them to find their own solutions. And that is like some of the best feeling in the world. Like, just being able to, first of all, voice it out loud is in and own self helpful, just to be able to talk about your problem without somebody trying to tell you how to fix it.
Right.
And it allows you to start working through it yourself. So I just think that's absolutely amazing. And we could all do that for all the people in our lives, right? The ones we're caregiving, I think is the great place to start with.
And worrying about things, but we're out of time, but I want to share because it just reminded me. I started this day thinking about an assignment I have to do for this group. It's a 3-part assignment. I haven't done it yet. I have until tomorrow night. And I'm like, gosh, I'm going to do it tonight. And I got to dedicate the time. I really just wanted to chill out and do nothing tonight. Busy weekend, right? And then all of a sudden the day changed and I had time today to do it. And I finished it. I'm all done. My point here is I worried about it in some regards. And little did I know things would change and I'd have a quick opening and I could work on it. So why did I worry about it? It was pointless. That's it. Live now. Marika, how do we connect with you? If somebody's a caregiver going through some challenges with that, how do we find you?
You can find me on my website, coachmarika.com. That's Marika. And there is a free video on there that you can get, which talks about how to support your loved one when they're in pain. And it kind of is very similar to what we're talking about the importance of just being there to listen to them as opposed to try and fix it for them. So that is on my website. You will find it right at the menu there, free videos. So highly encouraged, go check that out if this is something you've struggled with. And that's the best place to be.
Wonderful. Always talking with you. Love your compassion. That's your superpower. It totally is.
Nice. Good to know. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. And looking forward next time we talk.
Sounds good, Steve.
Thanks.
All right.
We'll be right back.
Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.